This is An American Workplace, a podcast dedicated to rewatching and discussing NBC's beloved mockumentary series, The Office. My name is Katie White, and joining me as always is my good friend and co-host, Chad Hopkins. How are you this late Tuesday evening, Chad?
I'm doing all right. You know, it is late, but as I just told you, we normally record on Wednesdays and we release Thursdays. So recording Tuesday night, I don't have to edit tonight. So I'm happy, especially after last week's fiasco.
Yeah, about that fiasco, my nice, pretty, new, expensive hard drive should be nice and fast. So
yeah, here's
thanks,
hoping.
Everyone.
Yeah, thank you all for your patience. It was a tough week for both of us because your computer just completely died while we were still recording, and so that left me solo to finish it. And then once I got it all edited and piecemealed together, the way I did it, just for people who are interested, I downloaded the audio from the live stream, and then I spliced together your audio with the audio I recorded on my computer. And so it did take a while, but I was all interested in audio quality. And then I export the file only for it to be fuzzy for some reason. And so I tried to go back into my software, and what do you know? It lost my audio, so I couldn't fix it. So
Goodness.
it was just technology working against both of us. But thank you all for being patient, and hopefully that doesn't happen again or happens very rarely because, you know, part of having a good podcast is, yes, good discussion, which I think we have aplenty, but also good audio quality. And so we don't want to let you guys down.
Yeah, hopefully the bulk of our technical issues are over. That was not fun. Yeah, Chad, I texted Chad as soon as my computer crashed, and I was like, there is a blinking question mark on my screen. This does not look good. And I was like, can you finish solo? Thankfully, we got most way through before my computer decided to completely die. So thanks for your patience. We do have a new review from, pardon my pronunciation, Zarna Ziura, we think is your name, is the pronunciation of her name. Thank you for your kind words. And from Pilly Baxto, who we believe is Shirley Lim, who also just subscribed on Patreon. So thank you both, thank you all for your words and your subscriptions.
And with that, let's just go ahead and dive into our first episode.
Crime Aid is the first one we're talking about today. It aired on October 23rd, 2008, was directed by Jennifer Salata, and written by Charlie Grandy.
Things between Michael and Holly are off to a good start as they embark upon their third date. What was meant to be dinner reservations turned into sex in the office stairwell, so yay for them. Not yay, however, is when they show up for work the next day to find that Dunder Mifflin and it's not addressed, but potentially the other businesses in the building has been robbed, all because they forgot to lock the doors after finishing their work the night before. To recoup their losses, Michael decides to host a crime aid auction in the warehouse, with the Schrodinger's cat big ticket item being a pair of front row Bruce Springsteen tickets and backstage passes to a concert, and those may or may not exist, as we come to find out.
Yeah, it's gotta feel pretty funny when you're so excited about your date that you don't even make it to the date before you have sex, and then you ruin everyone's month or year by having all of their stuff stolen because you were just so eager. So that's exactly what happened for Michael and Holly. Michael, who was really trying, I guess, to be a gentleman and didn't want to assume that they were having sex, so he just went ahead and asked her, hey, do you think we'll be having sex after our date? And she said yes. And he, I guess that's polite, I guess. It's a little weird. I don't think it's the normal way to go about doing that. But it was their third date. And Michael says that is the traditional thing that you do on a third date. So he just wanted to make sure that she was on the same page. Thankfully, she was.
Yeah, I'll take his word on that. I wrote it in my notes. He asked her, or drops the sex hint in the most nonchalant way. He says, what we eat sort of depends on if we're having sex after. And boom, it's out there. And it's funny that she's just as excited about it as he is. She answers, hell yeah. In fact, this is the second date in as many nights. It's their third date total, but the night before they were out mini golfing. They were talking about it when they got to work. Michael says, hey, I'm enjoying myself. I'm enjoying spending time with you. When can we meet up again? She says, hey, I'm free tonight. Boom. I mean, they are all full speed ahead. And they're just a great match for each other, that they can be that upfront with each other and not just completely throw things off. I think to How I Met Your Mother in episode 1, when Ted says, I love you on the very first date, and that just completely crashes that relationship right off the bat. But I feel like if Michael had said it in this episode, Holly might have reciprocated pretty easily.
I love going off the food thing. What I eat depends on whether or not we have sex. It cuts to a talking head of Michael just completely serious, completely deadpan, and he goes, I'll probably get soup or something light. Like, he's just completely planning out his meal. He's very concerned about what food to eat before you have sex. It feels like, to me, it's been a long time since he's had enjoyable sex.
Probably.
If that's
accurate.
A way to put it. Like, I feel like Jan wasn't fun. So that's probably where he's at now, is that this could be something that he actually looks forward to. So I think he's very nervous, and it's cute. It's showing.
Yeah. He knows that he can joke with Holly, but in a way she also keeps him in check. Holly's sense of humor to me seems at least a bit more refined than his, and she's less tone deaf than he is. So like when there's a joke that goes on for too long, she says, hey, it's done. Like the example is the whole, oh, I just remembered I can't go out with you tonight. I'm going out with you tonight bit that they go back and forth on a couple times. And Michael drags it on and on and on. She says, nope, that's enough. That's good. We can move on. So they have that similar sense of humor, but she's just like, okay, now is the time to move on to something else.
Which Michael needs. Like, he didn't need a Jan. He didn't need somebody. He didn't need a teacher or a mom. But he needs a little bit of correction. And I think Holly is a good balance for that.
I wonder why Michael decided to set the dinner reservation for so late. We know they get out of the office at 5, and he set the reservations for 8 p.m. And so I don't know if he was planning on them going home and getting ready for this date, or if it was the plan from the start to just hang out after work until the time. And that's what gets them so riled up and eager for sex, is that they're waiting around with this tension in the air, playing cards while they're waiting to go eat dinner first. And so they're just chilling out in the office by themselves for 2.5 hours until it's time to go. So I don't know exactly what was going through his mind there. That's a question I ask a lot of the time with Michael. But here it's not because he's making some sort of racist joke. It's just, I guess, poor planning.
And then I did think it was interesting that Holly, quote unquote, forgot her keys so that they could lose the camera crew. So they were on their way out. They were nearly to the car, and Holly said, oh, shoot, I forgot my keys. I need to go back in. Will you come with me? And Michael and Holly go back in, and she just wanted to make out with him without the camera crew watching. And so Michael says, oh, if we turn down our mics, we'll be completely alone. And of course he turns them all the way up, and we hear everything. And it evidently does not just become making out. They have sex in the office, and that's when the whole not locking up thing takes place. But I thought it was interesting that Holly initiated that. So she is just as eager as he is.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of a moment when Michael tried to shut out the camera crew from his office by closing all the blinds, but then he forgot about his microphone in the same way that he did here. I don't know why he didn't just take it off and turn it off. That seemed like it'd be the smarter, easier thing to do. But it does make for a really funny moment as he turns the microphone all the way up. And I guess the camera crew gets a little bit more than they bargained for that night, as far as documentary footage goes. At least audio. But then the robbery does happen. They show up at work the next day together, and everything is gone. The office is stripped clean. There's no computers. Oscar's laptop is missing. No, that's a deleted scene. We'll get to that later. Andy's chair. They were ransacked. The robbers were merciless, and they just took everything. And Holly feels really bad because she realizes that, yeah, it's probably our fault.
Anything immediately about Michael or Holly, or do you want to move on for a bit?
Well, there is the whole notion of the imaginary Springsteen tickets going into the auction, but we can talk about that once we get to that portion of the auction. So
the auction. Michael decides to host a crime aid auction. He thinks that it'll be this big community event when in reality, the office, David Wallace, which is cool, shows up. And I think there were a couple of faces we didn't know. Maybe a couple of community members came. But more than likely it was, a friend of somebody or somebody's sister who was in town. Like, it was just going to be random people. I don't think it was a big community event by any means. We knew most of the faces there. And so Michael decides that everyone should auction off something to help replenish the office and what was stolen. And the big ticket item is these Bruce Springsteen tickets, which Michael scored. They're supposed to be amazing, front row, backstage pass, the whole nine. And we see a number of people auction off things. We get Phyllis is auctioning off a hug. We get Hank from security auctions off a horrible CD of him playing guitar. We have Daryl auctioning off time at the bar right now, meaning let's blow off this auction. So really a number of people just auctioning off little tiny things that they may or may not have. It could be a service. It could be, just let's get out of here.
The whole time this is happening, there's this sort of side B plot between Andy, Angela, and Dwight, where at the beginning of the episode, Andy and Angela are passing out save the dates for their wedding. And that's significant because it means that, one, Angela is further committing despite her infidelity, and Andy, number two, is still oblivious to her infidelity. And then even further, Dwight feels betrayed because here he thought he had something with Angela. Yes, she's engaged to Andy, but she's not sleeping with him. She's sleeping with Dwight. And now further committing to the engagement, further committing to a date, like we are getting married. When this date comes, it is our time to be together. It ruins that idea in his head that she was committed to him in a way too. It's sort of a separation. And so it's upsetting to see how upset he is when he talks to Phyllis and he just desperately asks, why is she marrying Andy?
And Phyllis actually has some pretty good insight. She says, Angela's not really a risk taker and Andy's not really a risk, which is exactly right. Angela is not interested in anything that's not a sure thing. She thinks that Andy is a little boring and a little safe, and that's exactly what she needs, what she wants. But it's not even really what she wants, because we can see how disinterested she is in the whole relationship and in Andy. But it's what she thinks she wants. And so she is, quote, committing to Andy because it's safe. And Dwight, it was too unpredictable for her, I think. And she just couldn't predict his every move. And Angela is a control freak, and she needed to have control over every aspect of that relationship, and she didn't have it.
Andy's a college graduate who comes from a family with money. So, I mean, that's about as safe as you can get, really, honestly. Dwight is this farm owner who lives on the edge of society. He's got familial ties back to Nazism, we've heard in the past. There's lots of risk where Dwight is concerned, and it's just not there with Andy. So I think that's a question we've asked here before, and we've sort of bantered some ideas back and forth, but Phyllis just really hits the nail on the head. Now, throughout the rest of the episode, you see Dwight conferring with Phyllis, asking for advice, and she says, how about you give her an ultimatum, give Angela an ultimatum, so she knows that you are going to make her make a choice. She either chooses Andy, or she breaks off the engagement and chooses you. Dwight sees that as, okay, this is a way to win Angela back, but really what Phyllis is saying, this is a way to either have Angela or move on with your life. And he really doesn't see that second option as acceptable, and he lets her know that later in the episode.
It was basically, you have Andy or you have me. And if you have Andy, you cannot have me. And Dwight kind of misses that part. The sex will stop. I will stop sleeping with you if you choose Andy. And Angela ultimately makes it clear that she chooses Andy. She missed the deadline that Dwight gave her, and so Dwight goes to Phyllis and says, okay, she rejected me, now what? Phyllis says, well, now you have your answer, and now you can move on. He says, that was your master plan all along? That's not a plan. And she says, I think everyone deserves to be with someone who wants to be with them, or something like that. It's a nice gesture to Dwight that she thinks he can find someone who wants to be with him, and Angela's not that person. But Dwight's not really settling for that. He really, really wants to be with Angela, and he can't understand that she doesn't reciprocate that.
The scene where Phyllis offers the advice of giving the ultimatum is in the elevator, which I just wanted to note is a really unique shot because it's from the perspective of the elevator security camera. And I just wanted to ask, do we think the documentary crew got the elevator security footage, or did they plant their own camera in the elevator? Just a who knows kind of thing, you know?
I hadn't really thought about that. I saw the angle, but I didn't think about... It would seem almost too intrusive to take the security footage. I don't know.
There was reference to security tapes because Dwight points out to Michael that whoever robbed the place, one, it's a classic 7-man job. I don't know how he knows that, but they stole the security footage, and so they don't have any way to actually identify these thieves. And so there's reference to security cameras, and the only place I can think of that we know of is the elevator. So I don't know if they maybe just got permission, or maybe in creating this documentary, the office, Park, or Scranton, or Dunder Mifflin waived their rights to any sort of footage taken on the premises. I don't know. But just an interesting question. It's not that important in the scheme of things.
Interesting to think about, though.
Yeah.
And one more thing on Andy and Angela. You said it already, but it's worth really driving home that they were passing out save the dates. They set a date for their wedding, which last time we saw them planning, Angela was just crapping on every idea that Andy had, and this isn't good enough, and I don't want to get married there, and just really, really being hard on him. So they evidently found a place and found a day, and they're making steps in the right direction. So that's got to be killing Dwight.
His forlorn look after Angela chooses Andy, he gave her the deadline of, I think, 6:14 p.m., which is during the auction. And he stares at her, and she just stares over at Andy. And so she's made her choice. And he just looks so depressed. And he just stares after her for a moment before he droops his head in defeat. And later, Dwight and Phyllis meet again. He blames her, says, "You're just being selfish because you want to keep the job as head of the party planning committee." And Phyllis slaps him. And time passes, but then it's Phyllis's turn to auction off her hug. And Michael doesn't think there'll be any interest, but it turns into a bidding war between Bob Vance Refrigeration, Oscar, and Dwight, it turns out, who just keeps on upping everybody's bid by a penny, which isn't how auctions work, but whatever, Dwight. But what I think that shows, earlier in the episode, she said to Dwight, and you said this as well, she thinks everyone deserves to be with someone who also wants to be with them. And by bidding on her and driving up the price, he shows, one, that he's thankful for the effort she put forth to help him with his problem. And it also allows Bob to show how much he cares about her by shelling out, in the end, $1,000 just to hug his wife. So I thought that was a sweet moment from Dwight, just to sort of say thank you to Phyllis.
See, that's funny because I took that in a totally different way. I took that because Andy was bidding on Phyllis's hug.
That's true,
that
too.
Dwight was just trying to be the alpha male and just be like, I have more money than you. I mean, 1 penny more, but I have, I'm gonna win against Andy. Both, probably. And it should be noted that it's for Phyllis, for her auction items. So.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all now that you mention it. I think that's a good insight because I forgot that Andy was bidding as well. Andy says to Angela, "I need a hug right now unless you're going to give me one." She says, "Not here."
I had that in my funny moments. I love that. Not here.
So yeah, I think there is room for both of those because at the end of it all, I think Dwight does have a little, like a look on his face, a certain look about him that shows that he's pleased that Phyllis is so pleased with how well that turned out. So,
and it should be noted that her hug sold for $1,000. So, to Bob, I guess, in the end, yeah.
Now, there's not a lot with Pam specifically. We learn at the very start that she got a part-time job at corporate because it's expensive in New York. Michael got her the job, so now he knows where to reach her 16 to 18 hours a week. But I also noted, that means Jim does too, right? Because in last episode, we talked about how they were just sort of off the mark with each other and weren't able to get in contact. So hopefully that eases that situation a little bit. And then also the deleted scene at the bar with her art school friends from the last episode was used as the drunk voicemail in this episode. So nice redistribution of assets, I think is the term. It worked out.
Yeah, that was really subtle. It was just a little tiny clip of it. It was talking about how, like, you could take the girl out of Philly, and then Pam says Scranton.
Right.
And in the deleted scene, they make fun of her for Scranton. But it was just that, it was those two little lines that they clipped from that deleted scene. So it was cool to place that. So they did end up using it eventually. We get a little bit of Jim. So Jim takes Daryl's offer to go out to the bar in the middle of the auction. Daryl goes to the front, says, somebody want to grab a drink with me and the warehouse guys right now? Jim says, $5. Daryl says, sold. And so they go out to the bar. They're out with the warehouse guys. Jim's there. He goes to the bar to buy a round of drinks. And who walks in but Roy? So things are awkward and tense. Roy says, don't worry, I'm not going to hit you. Jim says something. He says, oh, okay, I wasn't thinking you were. And then Roy joins the group. So eventually Roy and Jim get to talking, and Roy asks all about Pam, and Jim fills him in. He says that Pam is happy, that they are engaged. She's at art school in New York. And he says, you know what, she's really happy. Like, she was out with her friends until 8 a.m. And Roy says, well, you were a friend, meaning you don't know what she's doing. So Jim decides to hop in his car and drive to New York. Thankfully, he makes it about halfway, I assume. He's on his way. And he says, you know what? No, I'm not going to do this. I'm not that guy, and we are not that couple. And he turns around. As I've said, I watched with the captions, and this was the first time I've watched this one with captions, because I always thought he said, thought you were her friend, which also works, but this is so much more. When he says, you were a friend, like, you were just a friend. I was engaged to Pam, and Jim was a friend, and now you're engaged to Pam. So that was a lot more than what I thought it was.
He plants that idea, and you see it immediately take hold in Jim's mind. But I'm so glad that he does change his mind right before he takes that exit to New York. Because going to New York City like this, for the reason he did, is a total Roy move. Or, you know, it's born of jealousy. I don't know if Roy actually would have put forth that much effort, to be honest. But it's a Roy thought that Pam would be out there in New York cheating on him. And so I'm glad Jim realizes, no, it's silly. I trust Pam. Our relationship is real. I'm looking forward to marrying this girl, and I know that she's looking forward to marrying me back. So it's a very mature moment that he turns back around and just forgets it all.
Watching him in the car when he says that line, I'm not that guy and we are not that couple, he seems almost relieved to realize that he has nothing to worry about. It's like he just remembers, like, it's Pam and it's me and we're fine. It's like, it just hits him. And he's like, you know what? No, we don't need to do this. And that's such a nice, like, he's like reminded of his relationship, which is just refreshing.
Now, going back to Holly and Michael, Michael did promise the Bruce Springsteen tickets, and he keeps delaying it throughout the entire auction. In fact, starting off the auction, he's playing Huey Lewis and the News' Heart of Rock and Roll because he thinks it's a Bruce Springsteen song. Not really much similarity between those two bands, but whatever. And Daryl actually, this is a funny moment as well, but Daryl says, yeah, Michael gave me a top 10 list of his favorite Bruce Springsteen songs. 3 of them were Huey Lewis and the News. One was Tracy Chapman's Fast Car. Yeah, and then the other was Short People by Randy Newman, who, if you don't know who Randy Newman is, he's the guy who sings the songs in Toy Story movies. So not much similarity whatsoever between those two people.
They're both men, singers.
Okay, you got me. Yes, they are men. And they're both musicians
That's about
in some respect. So that always makes me laugh, hearing Michael like try and hype everybody up for these Springsteen tickets with Huey Lewis and the News. But then he leads in with puns throughout the whole thing, and people keep thinking he's about to give off these items, but eventually the time comes when he has to sort of ride or die. He says, "Oh no, these tickets are gone. Has anybody seen an envelope labeled Bruce Springsteen front row and backstage pass? No? Oh, well, I guess they're lost then. Sorry, guys." And it's a pretty, I want to say it's a pretty good lie. It's not really, but it was a sort of clever spur of the moment thing, I think, where, oh man, I was stupid enough to label the envelope and somebody stole them. It's like he's trying to use his own ineptitude to work for him, kind of.
So I know I had the discussion topic today, and I do have one planned, but also this, since we're talking about it. Like, what do you think he thought was going to happen? Like, did he... It seems like he just thought tickets might just appear, and that he could just use them. Like, I don't know what he was thinking.
I don't know. I think he was trying to prove Oscar wrong, because when he first mentioned the idea of the auction, Oscar says, this is just going to end up being us spending money on things we don't want to get money back for ourselves, which doesn't work. And so by coming up with this hot ticket item, Michael was hoping to get people that aren't Dunder Mifflin employees in seats. And as you already mentioned, he wasn't very successful. I think there's maybe 5 or 6 in like the back rows that we just don't recognize, but they don't win any of the bids that we see. And then when Michael admits that the tickets are gone, they pretty much all leave anyways. So there's even this deleted scene where Michael says, "Don't ask me how I got the tickets. Don't ask me if I got the tickets. In fact, don't ask me anything about the tickets." And so I don't know what he was planning on happening, if he was planning on having a bid and then realizing that the tickets weren't there and just keeping the money because they did the bid. I don't know what was going through his head, but it wasn't very well thought out.
There's no good scenario.
No.
It's all, yeah.
But what does come out of that situation, I think a moment of maturity is when he actually approaches Holly when all is said and done and starts to confess to her. And I think that's a big deal for Michael. I don't think Michael pre-Holly would have confessed to anybody that he was completely lying about it. I think back to healthcare in season 2, there was never any admission that there wasn't a surprise, In that scene, Holly has a talking head where she says, the Springsteen tickets are always too good to be true. A lot of Michael seems to be too good to be true, but everything has been true so far, except for the tickets. But they're very happy together. Yeah, and that's what the end of this episode really cements to me, is yes, they screwed up and got a whole bunch of stuff stolen, but they're still happy in their relationship together.
And at the very end of the episode, we get a little drama. David Wallace is there to support the crime aid. He auctions off a weekend at his place at Martha's Vineyard. And at the end of the auction, he sees Michael kiss Holly. So close. He did not know that they were dating. And that's what he says. That's the last take of the episode, the last scene. He says, "I did not know that they were together." Yeah, so that's some bad news.
Yeah, he's very obviously bothered by it. And after the whole Jan Michael situation and the aftermath of that, I don't blame him. But we have to wait until 5 minutes from now to figure out what happens. So let's move into our funny moments. What do you got, Katie?
It's always a good time when we get Creed funny moments, so I will start with him. After they've been robbed, Creed says nobody steals from Creed Bratton and gets away with it. The last person to do this disappeared. His name? Creed Bratton. So that opens up just so many questions. What I believe happened is that Creed took somebody's identity.
I guess so.
That's what I take from it. Yeah, so Creed is not Creed.
Yeah, we know Creed's not his real name because in Money, in season 3, with Michael declaring bankruptcy and all that, Creed says, yeah, when Creed Bratton gets debt, he just transfers it to this other person. I don't remember the name, but it's his actual identity.
William Charles Schneider.
Oh, that's right. Good job. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it makes sense that he is trying to pass that off as a stolen identity, which I think is funny. And then later he tries to auction himself with no details. It's just Creed. He says, "Yeah, it's all inclusive." I don't want to know what that
I feel
means.
like it could be. Yeah, no, don't want to dig into that.
I love that, at the start of the episode, Holly and Michael are talking about their date the previous night and playing mini golf. Michael says, I've been thinking about getting my own set of putt-putt golf clubs. So, one club? Golf people, you can, yeah, golf people, you can call me super wrong, but for my limited knowledge of golf, and especially on a mini golf course, you only need the one putter. That's it. You don't need anything else. So
I've never been playing putt-putt and had a caddy.
No.
Like, maybe you should use a different. No.
There's the adult putter and there's the kiddie putter. So unless he means he needs one of each for some reason, that's all he's got.
Michael, regarding his sex on the third date, he has a talking head where he says, "In my opinion, the third date is traditionally the one where you have sex. Does Holly feel that way? I don't know. I will probably find out tonight. If she starts having sex with me, I'll know for sure."
Just sporadically.
Just like a surprise.
Yeah. Oh, wow, she's having sex with me.
Oh, my goodness.
And then later, after the place has been robbed and he has his own talking head where he says, "So much for sex without consequences." That's not even remotely what that phrase refers to.
Oh my goodness. Also, Michael, after the office has been robbed, he said it is not known how many office robberies occur every second because there is no Wikipedia entry for office robbery statistics. So he clearly wanted to sound like he knew what he was talking about and went on Wikipedia and looked up office robberies. I guess he wanted to make Crime Aid even more official.
Yeah, and pitching his idea for the auction, he says, "We'll auction off people like in the olden days." And you just see this death glare from Stanley in the corner. Not funny.
Speaking of Crime Aid, it's a, gosh, I always forget the word of this, anagram. Right?
Anagram, or I was going to say acronym, but I don't know which one's correct either. Now that you have me confused,
I can never get them right. One is if it spells out a word, and one if it's just like, I don't know. Anyway, Crime Aid. He thought it should be called Crime Aid, and then came up with what it stood for. Crime reduces innocence, makes everyone angry. I declare.
I did some sleuthing. It is acronym.
Acronym, great. Okay. Good. I'll forget it tomorrow.
Probably me too. But yeah, I love that one. Crime reduces innocence, makes everyone angry. I declare. It makes me think of a future episode that actually happens a season, 2 seasons from now, where I declare is used a lot. So we have that to look forward to.
Yes.
Man, what a terrible auctioneer Michael is. You have the fast talking people who typically run these events, and the fastest talking he can do is come up with "hey, batter, batter" lots of times, and then lots of just absolute gibberish nonsense it's not talking, it's not words.
It's just sounds that sound like fast talking. Kevin has he would like to auction something, and so he tries to auction off his services as an accountant. He'll do your taxes, federal and state, and crickets around the room because no one wants Kevin near their taxes. Don't want him in charge of your livelihood.
No, not at all. Dwight, throughout the episode, he's very vulnerable to Phyllis, letting her in on how he feels, only for him to end their conversations by completely ruining the moment by, for example, saying, "What you're eating is really fattening." She responds, "It's lettuce." Or kicking her out of the elevator on the first floor so that he can go back up alone. It happens time and time again throughout the episode. Every time they meet up, he ends it by putting her down, which isn't necessarily funny, but there's one more example when he lets out the air out of her tires just so he can tell her that someone let the air out of her tires and get her out of the auction so he can talk with her. She says, "Why didn't you just say it? You didn't have to actually do it. Nobody knew." But yeah, Dwight messing with Phyllis.
I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's worth noting just really how bad Hank's guitar playing is. It's security guard Hank, and it's like he just took his first guitar lesson and he learned like 1 to 4 5 chords and just da 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 me and the blues.
I'm absolutely convinced those are the only lyrics for the whole song.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a whole CD though, and I'm wondering like how many tracks are there? Are there other chords? Like, I think it's just that with maybe I would buy that CD. Absolutely. I would listen to it.
And the title is Hank Doyle is the Blues. He is the blues. Which, I mean...
He's the blues, and then later it's me and the blues, so it's Hank and Hank.
Andy tried to comfort Angela at one point in the episode. He says, "You're always safe with me. I'm a very good screamer." Yeah, not a good defender of your honor. He just can scream really loud so others can come and help. Okay, so Ryan tries to hide his face after David Wallace shows up at the auction, because Ryan is scared of David Wallace after that phone conversation he had a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, as he should be.
But then when, in the aftermath of everything getting stolen, Oscar says, "Great, they stole my laptop." Kevin says, "Yeah, well, they stole my surge protector." Oscar says, "How does that even compare?" Kevin, "Oscar, I'm now going to be prone to surges."
He's not wrong.
He's not. Not at all.
Some deleted scenes from this episode. I will start strong with my personal favorite. Michael asks Pam to overnight him a slice of New York-style pizza because he has just gotta have it. And she does. We see him open an envelope containing a slice that is, like, falling apart because it's just not held up well. And he eats it and then quotes The Godfather.
She didn't put too much care into wrapping it, and I wouldn't have either, but it's just like a slice of pizza in a cardboard envelope. Like, there's no plastic wrap or aluminum foil. It's just a New York slice. And I wonder if she went and gave Michael the courtesy of getting it from his favorite New York pizza joint, Sbarro.
This is going to sound like such a dumb New Yorker thing to say, but there are these dollar slice places, like all in Midtown, where you can buy a slice for $1.
That sounds amazing.
It's kind of amazing. They are horrible, but you have to eat them really, really hot, and then they taste fine. If you eat them immediately, they're great.
Awesome.
And I can almost guarantee that's what it was, because it would be cheaper than Sbarro, and they're everywhere, and Pam does not care. So she just...
Yeah.
Put it in an envelope, and like the shipping costs more than the pizza, I'm sure.
Yeah, he opens it and it's all smushed and old and falling apart, and not happy times.
Yeah.
Michael also decides to give date ideas to Jim. He says there's 2 sure things, and then there's a wild card. And Jim says, "Let's hear the wild card first." Okay, well, the wild card is dinner at a nice restaurant. And Jim says, "Uh-oh." Because if that is his wild card, then you better be concerned for what Michael's sure things are. And it turns out the first sure thing is blindfolding her and taking her to a Harry Houdini museum and involving chains and not good ideas. And then the second one is going to the mall and going to a bed store, a mattress store, letting her pick out whatever mattress she wants. Jim says, "Oh, that sounds nice." And then having sex on that mattress in the middle of the store. Nope. I like the wild card idea. Thanks.
One step too far.
Yeah.
He goes, surprisingly, let's do the wild card. That's nice. Speaking of Jim and Pam watch an episode of West Wing together every night that they are apart. She wanted to watch Cranford. He wanted to watch Battlestar Galactica. Pam says, well, we're going to watch Cranford next. Jim says, yeah, we're never going to watch Cranford. But I wanted to share this because the irony of Jim wanting to watch Battlestar Galactica after all the crap he gives Dwight. Yeah. I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that says it's a good show. I've never watched it.
But I'm sure it is, but he needs to cut the making fun of Dwight if he's going to watch it himself.
And I never heard of Cranford ever in my life. And so I looked it up, and
I have no idea.
It's a BBC series. And I recognize 2 actors in the entire production of like 20, 30 actors. One's Imelda Staunton, who played Umbridge in the Harry Potter series, and the other is Michael Gambon, who was Dumbledore from Harry Potter 3 to the end. Those are the only people I recognize, but it It's a BBC series. There's 7 episodes. So
I would watch it based on the Harry Potter actors alone. Great.
there's a meeting between Angela, Daryl, and Michael about funds needed in the warehouse. Angela is asking for Michael's approval since she's the head of accounting on moving funds around for a new forklift, among other things. And Michael says, hell yeah, which is what Holly just said to him about having sex. So clearly he's got something else on the mind. We know what it is. Daryl sees that he's distracted, so he makes up a story about like lawn gnomes in the walls of the warehouse drinking their soda pop. And Michael says, yeah, soda. And that's it. He's very clearly distracted, looking forward to sex with Holly.
Kelly is at the auction. I love this one. And decides to auction off a dance lesson to learn the moves to Soulja Boy Tell Him's Crank That. Ryan bids $40. He says, if I had 45, I would bid 45. If I could bid the moon and the stars, Kelly, I would bid them. And so he wins. Kelly is up there doing her dance and gets like really sweaty and hot. And she steps off and does a talking head where she says that she's going to go to his house, teach him the dance, make it so that he really wants to sleep with her, shower at his place, and then leave. But she's not going to sleep with him. She's just like loving torturing Ryan. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, I'm amazed that she's holding out so long. And she really is bringing on the torture.
Yeah. And Ryan is really, really wanting her back. $45 worth of dance lessons wanting her back.
Dwight is sitting outside with Phyllis while eating his sandwich. And he's talking about their first date. They went to the Anthracite Coal Museum, Dwight and Angela, which they'd both been to before, but they lied so that they got all of the extra information. And then they corrected the tour guides when they got it wrong. They thought that was so great, so romantic. And for her time and her efforts to help him out, he offers Phyllis half a sandwich. And he's got half a sandwich in his hand because he just finished the first half. He says, well, good, I will bring you one tomorrow because you have earned it. And so he bites into the second half of the sandwich. He says, I hope you like fox meat because it's fox meat that he's eating. So I don't think Phyllis wants that second half so much anymore.
Yeah, not so much. Last one for me, Michael and Holly, after their not locking up the night before, make a big, huge to-do about locking up behind themselves, but they're not the last ones in the office. Andy is distracted, texting or something, and isn't watching where he's going, and runs straight into the locked glass door. Which I have done. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a day and age when we expect doors to open for us, and sometimes they don't.
Honestly.
Just a couple more from me. I alluded to this one earlier because there's several in a row of people dealing with the theft in the office. Creed is stealing cash off of Meredith's desk in the confusion. Stanley mourns the loss of a bottle of creamed sherry he was saving for his last day of work. And then Andy complains about how the robbers didn't just take my stuff. They adjusted my chair so that it's the same height as Phyllis's. It's got the same arm angles as Phyllis's, and it even smells like Phyllis. So, to an educated person who I guess didn't go to Cornell, Phyllis stole his chair. I mean, that's the logical conclusion here.
Yeah.
But Andy doesn't see it that way.
Cornell, you mean is it Ivy League? Is that right?
Yeah, something like that.
Did Andy go there?
I think so.
Yeah.
I hearsay.
Yeah.
And then one more small thing. Meredith comes up to auction her thing, but she just sort of mumbles into the microphone. So we don't know what it is, and everybody just assumes it's something sexual. Oscar says, I'll take it, and bids $1. But turns out it's an iPhone, and it's still wrapped and new. I don't know where Meredith got an iPhone to auction off, but she did, and so now Oscar has an iPhone.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, who thought that was going to be sexual? And everyone raised their hands.
Including Meredith.
Yeah. So for our discussion topic today, what service or item or whatever would you auction off at Crime Aid?
You know that Rubik's Cube you've had sitting in the corner for the past 5 years, and it hasn't been solved because you don't know how, you don't want to take the time to learn how, and you don't want to peel off the stickers. I will come and I will solve that Rubik's Cube for you. Boom.
I'm so glad. Somebody needs to do it. Really.
Yeah.
I didn't even really have an answer to my own question. I'm a photographer, so I could do that. Or, yeah.
That works.
I could tell you office facts.
Office facts.
Yeah,
we could do that.
About the office.
I will assist you and your office trivia team.
Yes. If you're going to a TV trivia, take me. I'm your girl.
By the way, that event is still next week. It's the same night as my orchestra's concert, so I'm hoping I can get to the later. Well, there's a later show at 9:30, so I'm hoping I can get there. We'll see. But Perfect. I've been playing. There's an app on the App Store called Quiz Up, and there's an office category, and so I've been playing that a lot.
Downloading as soon as we're done. Yep.
Okay, everybody, we are recording part 2 of this podcast on a second night, so if we sound a little bit different, that's why, and we are going into Employee Transfer. It aired on October 30th of 2008, so it was this season's Halloween episode. It was directed by David Rogers, who was an editor, or is an editor for the show, and this was his first time directing an episode, and it was written by Anthony Farrell.
A few story points in this episode, but keeping it short and sweet. When corporate found out that Michael and Holly were dating at the end of the last episode, they decided to move Holly back to her old branch in New Hampshire. So Michael's taking a personal day to move her back. Michael is convinced that they can make distance work, so they decide to give it a try, but Holly doesn't even last the ride to New Hampshire and decides to end things on the drive. Michael is, of course, devastated.
It's sad. At the start of the episode, before any of the drama of the road trip happens, Michael suggests to Holly that she quit and get a job in Scranton. And we see in a deleted scene that he suggested that she get a job as a baker or a baker's assistant, which calls back to Goodbye Toby when he first was trying to describe this warmth she had about her, like she was a baker already. So he suggests that, and she says, well, why don't you quit your job and move to Nashua and get a job in Nashua? Which is the first time we know that Holly came from another Dunder Mifflin branch. I don't think it's referenced before. She's just the new person on the scene, and Toby had to train her. But this is the first time it's referenced. She actually came from another Dunder Mifflin branch, and now she's going back.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess I always just assumed that she was Dunder Mifflin, which evidently she was, but I don't think they ever did address that. That's true. It is funny to me that they discuss very, very briefly the idea of, who's going to quit their job and move to the other state, because in all reality, I guess it would have made more sense in Michael's favor for her to quit, because she already lives now in Scranton and has for a bit. So he might have the upper hand there, but they don't linger on it long. They jinx each other and never talk about it again, and now it's moving day. So, evidently, it didn't go anywhere. She is moving back to New Hampshire, and, it's about a 7-hour drive, as they say in the episode, and so not really doable for, every weekend, although they think that they're going to give it a try.
Yeah, they do. It's funny, the just picturing them all lined up together in the front seat of Daryl's truck. It's so awful for Daryl. He's driving, of course. Michael sandwiched right next to him in the middle, and Holly on the outside. And it's just, it's a strange drive is what it is, because Michael and Holly are already strange individuals who are very much into each other, at least at the start of the trip. And Daryl suffers through the good and the bad on that drive. I love the use of Life is a Highway by Tom Cochrane. It's the original version from 95, I think, so not the Rascal Flatts version. It's just so well utilized, because it starts off, they're talking about how they're going to make this drive every weekend, so lots of time on the highway. And so life would be a highway in a lot of ways for them. And they're looking forward to it at the start. But the more they hear the song, they get up to 4 or 5 times, the more they think about the distance, the harder it is to imagine maintaining that level of contact on, such a regular basis. It's funny how the song sort of wears on them as they continue on. And it's while Michael is botching the first verse the 4th time, when Holly realizes that really she can't do this. The song wears on them. And by the time they get to the 4th time around and Michael's still butchering that first verse, Holly realizes that she can't spend life on a highway, or even with Michael on the highway. That's just a lot of commitment. And as she points out, they've only been dating for a few weeks. So it's just not going to work out.
Michael is so sure. Really, even kind of through the end of the episode, but we'll get to that in a bit. But he's so sure when he's talking about distance that it's going to be fine. He says, yeah, Holly's moving. It's okay. I'm going to be in the car every weekend. We'll find a halfway point. I'll go to her, whatever it takes. He's just so certain that it'll be fine. And things start to decline when they realize that they're about halfway between Scranton and Nashua. And great, we'll pull over and we'll find a cute little bed and breakfast somewhere to meet, and it'll be perfect. They pull over and it's nothing. There is nothing. And that's kind of when I think their spirits start to decline, and okay, maybe this isn't exactly how I pictured that it was going to be. And I think that's when Holly's wheels start turning, that this is not really feasible.
It's so sad seeing her just all of a sudden break down crying. There was also a moment where Michael fell asleep during the long drive, and at that point, Daryl points out that it's a longer drive than they expected, and there's no good halfway spot. It just all piles on top of her as not a good idea, and she doesn't think they can make it work. And it's sad because they're obviously a perfect match for each other. We've seen that in just even these last few episodes that they've been together. But distance is hard, and we've talked about that too. We see Pam and Jim struggling with distance too, and they're engaged. And so thankfully they have that duration, but Michael and Holly just don't have that additional foundation that Jim and Pam have to make it work. And Scranton is closer to New York than Nashua.
Yeah, it's a doable commute. It's only probably a few hours to get to Pennsylvania from New York. So even if you are as good a match as Holly and Michael, or at least as they seem to be at this time, you need more than a few weeks. And Pam is only gone for a few months. This would be an open-ended move for Holly. She would be there. I mean, she's moving back. So this is an open-ended long-distance relationship. No light at the end of the tunnel. That's a little permanent for a relationship that's been alive for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, I hate to say it because I love Michael and Holly, but I think that this was probably the right move. Because that would be just... I could see Michael just giving and giving and giving and giving and driving every weekend and being exhausted and just unhappy because he gets to see his girlfriend for 8 hours every week.
Mm-hmm. It would sort of turn the relationship into a chore, just like it was with Jan. I mean, and bless him, after she breaks down, he tries so hard to hold on to her. He says, I've dated nearly 4 women over the last 10 years, and you are so far above them, it is stupid. And then he has his talking head where they've stopped for a bathroom break or something. And he says, I'm not going to give up that easy. I'm going to make this way harder than it has to be. His heart's in the right place. That's the wrong approach. But he even tells her, here's my wish. I want you to meet a great guy and I want you to be happy. And she kisses him. She's thankful that he understands. He says, well, my wish has come true, incidentally, because you've met me and you are happy. Daryl decides is clever, Mike.
Clever, yeah.
But Michael even eventually understands that she's serious about this and is hesitant. And if there's that hesitation there, then it's just the foundation again isn't there. So he breaks down and admits that, I'm not strong enough. I'll probably go back to Jan and I hate Jan. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens at this point. But man, that moment in Nashua after they've unloaded her stuff and Michael makes a decision, I've got to go back. I can't stay and suffer through this indecision, suffer through this heartbreak. I'd rather just, sort of clean break it right now. I got stuff to do anyways. And when he tells her he's leaving and they just sort of wordlessly hold each other for a few seconds, it's such a sad moment.
Yeah, Daryl is helping unload the truck, or really doing most of the work. And he says, all right, this is the last bag, and it's Michael's overnight bag because he was going to stay with Holly. And Michael says, you know what, you can just throw that back in the car. I'm going back with you. And even Daryl was like, really? Like, you're not going to stay with her one last night? You don't want to see her off? And he says, no, this is it. Which, I don't know what to think of that. Like, it's so sad, as you said, and it's hard to see Michael. He's not a man of reality, I feel like, and so when reality finally does hit him that this is just not practical, it's kind of killer, because he knows, I think he knows immediately that this is a perfect woman for him, and he can't have her, and she wants him and he wants her, and they just can't make it work.
and not sticking out the weekend. I mean, I get it. It's like ripping off the Band-Aid. They're having to say goodbye probably for a very, very long time because they've just said that they can't make the long distance part of the relationship work. So in Michael's mind, and probably in Holly's mind too, why stick around and enjoy a last weekend together if it just means it's going to make the goodbye that much harder? So
It reminds me of like if you had a partner, like a boyfriend or a girlfriend in high school, and you knew that you were going to break up when you went to college, but you just like knew that that was going to happen, but you stayed together anyway until graduation. It's like, yeah, but like I wouldn't be able to enjoy the rest of that because I knew it would be ending. And I guess that's kind of where Michael is, that it's like, it's already ruined. It's already ended. So yeah, a sad moment. Even Daryl is a little bummed out by it too.
And gotta love that ending blues duet from Daryl and Michael. Michael not understanding how to do the duet, but they have a good time with it anyways. And I swear, the moment where Michael or Daryl raises the riff, right? He goes da na 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 na, and Michael tries to echo it, and his voice just completely breaks. I laugh every time, and I shouldn't because it's sad, but. It's really funny. It's na na na, just trying
like
so hard, singing his heart out.
But bless Daryl, he is helping how best he can. He knows that talking sense into Michael probably isn't going to work. That really talking it out is just not a thing that Michael's going to do. But darn it, they'll sing it out, and it does help. By the end of that little duet, we've got some laughs and some smiles back in Michael. So Daryl, that was sweet of him, and yeah, I think he just didn't want to sit through another 7-hour drive the same day with a sobbing Michael. So he tried to fix him up a little bit.
Now, back in Scranton, or in Boston, Jim left at the same time as Michael to go to Boston to eat with Pam and his two brothers. So we're meeting more Halperts for the first time, and their names are Pete and Tom, which is good trivia to remember, to celebrate Jim and Pam's engagement. And it is a weird lunch, is what it is. What do you have to think about all that nonsense?
Meeting families of other people, like meeting your boyfriend's family, is always stressful enough that the fact that they wanted to make this a joke, which ultimately turned into a joke kind of against Pam, is not ideal. I can imagine how awkward that was for Pam. And so what they did was they wanted to play a prank on Jim. Pam was all on board with this. She came up with her own prank. She said, okay, how about this? We'll say that I lost my engagement ring. I was in class. I put it in my smock and someone stole it, or I lost it. Something happened to it. And they were like, yeah, that's good. But instead, what if we just dogged you about being an artist and not making any money? And she was like, well, you came up with that awfully quickly.
Yeah.
That came out of nowhere. And they were both just so on board with it. And she was like, okay, yeah, I guess we'll do that one. And it just became so like pushed and awkward. And Jim was like, hey, guys, maybe you want to calm down a little bit about this. And they just kept pushing it the whole lunch long, to the point where it didn't feel like a prank. It just felt weird and attacky.
It's very mean-spirited, but Jim, true to form, is very defensive, even though they're his older brothers. And they seem sort of like the stereotypical bully older brothers, not in necessarily a super bad way, but he did reference some sort of history of them sort of beating him up a little bit. So he still, nonetheless, stands up to them and says, hey, why don't we chill out and focus on just enjoying each other's company, cool it with the art jokes or the jokes at Pam's expense, because he loves her and he wants her to pursue what makes her happy. Yeah, maybe she doesn't make as much money. Who cares? Why linger on that if it makes her happy? And his brothers are just being jerkbags. So I don't want to talk too much about the bullying itself, the joking or the pranking that the brothers are doing, because that's my discussion topic. But it's just like they're pushing it too far, and eventually Pam does have to stand up for herself a little bit, joke or not.
And then in Scranton, we get a kind of fun storyline here between Dwight and Andy. Dwight, in, I guess, the spirit of all of this Angela stuff, shows up wearing a Cornell sweatshirt. Do you know Cornell? It's the Ivy League school where Andy went.
Oh, yeah. I've heard it mentioned once or twice.
Cornell. So Dwight has decided that it's time he go to Cornell. If it's such a great school and clearly anyone can get in, Dwight has decided that he's going to go. So he's, starts with the paraphernalia. He's got the sweatshirt. He's got a mug. He's got a bobblehead. He's got a one of those flags that I always forget what they're called. Pennant. I was called a pendant. It's not what it is. Pennant. And he's just Mr. School Spirit. And Andy, our anger management friend, is losing it. So Andy decides somehow that he is going to be put in charge of Dwight's admission interview. Apparently that's allowed, which sounds like a horrible idea. So they end up just taking control over the interview. Like, it's a very macho dynamic. They're both just fighting it out. Again, Dwight, I think, over Angela. Andy, because, he doesn't know about Dwight and Angela, but just a power struggle. It's pretty comical.
I have a lot of questions about this. There is a deleted scene that sort of answers at least one of them, so we'll get to it. But what is Dwight hoping to accomplish? Is he just irritating Andy for irritation's sake because he took what Dwight wanted? I don't know what his end goal is here. What do you think?
I think it might just be to irritate him. It's not like it has anything to do with Angela.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to win her back in any way. She's not. I guess it would just be, okay, if I can't have her back, I'll at least make you miserable.
Right.
Which is very mature and straight thinking. But I guess it's just his petty little, I have to get you somehow, and if I can't have what I want, I'll just get you some other way.
But then my follow-up question would be, why is Andy so bothered by it? Because by all appearances, Dwight and Andy are friends at this point. They had a rough patch at the beginning, but after they got past that, they've gotten along pretty well. So is it because he knows that Dwight isn't serious? But if that's the case, what motivation would Andy see Dwight having for irritating him like this? It's not like he knows about the affair. So what does Andy think Dwight's doing? Do you know what I mean? Why does Andy automatically assume that he's joking about it rather than maybe being serious, actually?
That I don't know, because even just seeing Dwight in a Cornell sweatshirt, he says, "Take that sweatshirt off," and he's clearly already really agitated. I don't know. You and I both went to Texas Tech. If I saw somebody, if I saw somebody with, I don't know, a Tech sweatshirt on and they didn't go to Tech, I would still be excited. Be like, cool, you're a fan. If they were applying, even better. I don't know. Yeah, even if you have anger issues like Andy does, I don't know why that's motivation enough to be angry. I don't know.
I wonder if Andy just feels such a need to be unique that Cornell is his thing. And so no matter who it was, he wouldn't want to share being a Cornell graduate with anybody else in the office. Maybe?
Yeah, that's his one thing. It's what makes him special. It's impressive. It's a good school. It's Ivy League. And yeah, I guess anybody else having that would make him not special. Mm-hmm. So that's a good point.
It sort of goes back to what Ryan said back in The Fire in season 2. I don't want to be a guy who has a thing here. He ends up being the fire guy by the end of that episode, but Andy is the Cornell guy. And with Dwight sort of encroaching on that territory, I can sort of understand why Andy would feel threatened because he would no longer be the only one. So I love Dwight's quote, "If someone who barely outsells Phyllis can get in, I should be fine." He says, "I meant that as a compliment to you, Phyllis, as well as a slight to Andy." I don't know if that quite balances, but maybe.
Which, didn't we discuss that Phyllis was above Andy as far as sales ability? I was surprised to hear that he was a better salesman than Phyllis.
I want to say that Andy's sales ability is more of a focus later in the show. I remember specific moments where Andy says, I'm the worst salesman in the office or something like that. But I think that is actually much later. But
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there
We'll
has
have to
been a
keep that
reference
in
or two
mind.
at this point. So as you mentioned, he does call admissions and gets them to conduct Dwight's interview. And I just have to wonder how. Like, did Andy's family put a lot of money into the school? And so he has some sort of extra pull?
Very likely. However, it does not seem like a good idea at all.
No.
Like, it's not in Cornell's favor to have somebody that, like, if I was doing a college admission interview, I wouldn't want to know the person because A, they either like me and I'm going to get in and I don't deserve to get in, or B, they don't like me and I'm not going to get in, and like if I may deserve to get in. So it's just not a good idea. And why they would let that happen, I don't know. I hope that's not a real thing.
As Dwight points out, that's a conflict of interest. And Andy says, oh, yeah, big one.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So, I mean, otherwise, aside from the whole money thing, Andy's a pretty unexceptional Cornell graduate, and he's selling paper at a small regional paper company. So he really shouldn't have much say, especially once we see how the interview ends up going. It's just a mess. It's so unproductive. It's very clearly biased on both sides. And yeah, that's how that goes down.
I love remembering that Andy, who is a Cornell grad, is managed by Michael, who did not go to college. Like,
Yeah.
that's just, it just must knock Andy down a big peg, you know?
Yeah. Let's move on to funny stuff. Starting off with Michael. When he does fall asleep, as I mentioned earlier, he wakes up screaming from a nightmare. And it's just like, all of a sudden he's yelling. And Holly didn't even know he'd fallen asleep because he was talking before. Michael says, did I say anything interesting? Daryl, not really. Just flat out, nope, he didn't.
See, to me, I always thought that he didn't actually fall asleep, that he just wanted attention. I don't know why I feel like that, but that it just seems like something that a kid would do. I don't know why I have that thought. I could be totally crazy, but just like, it just makes me think of like, there's people that, I don't know where I'm going with this, but anyway, I feel like he's lying, but that's a different story.
I know what you mean, but for me, it also, in favor of him actually falling asleep, it emphasized the distance further to Holly. If the trip is long enough for Michael to just suddenly fall asleep, then maybe not such a great idea.
Yeah, if he's going to be making the drive every weekend.
Yeah.
Definitely not something he needs to be doing. As you mentioned, it was the Halloween episode. They didn't get a whole lot of screen time in costume, but we did get the cold open. We see some costumes. The most notable one, I think, would be Pam. Apparently in New York, they don't dress up like they do in Scranton, so she was the only one dressed up. She dressed up as Charlie Chaplin, but, as I said, the only one, so she looks a little crazy, and she can't even remove her hat, because if you can think of what Charlie Chaplin looks like without his hat, he looks like Hitler, especially if you're somebody dressing up as Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
So she's got the little mini mustache, and I forget what it's called, little thumbprint on her lip, and that's what she looks like all day.
Yeah. Then we've got Oscar dressed as Uncle Sam, Angela dressed as a cat again, and to match her, I suppose, Andy is dressed up as not a cat, but a kitten, which is the most ridiculous thing. It's so awkward. He's basically wearing a Broadway costume from Cats.
Yeah, it's like a spandex.
Yeah, instead of owning up to the fact that it's a Broadway costume, he says, no, I'm a kitten, which just makes it awkward.
Yeah, like, go with the less embarrassing.
Yeah.
We also have Jim as his usual minimalist self, dressing up as Dave, which is Jim in his office attire with a name tag that says Dave. And we have Creed, Dwight, and Kevin all dressed up as the Joker in various degrees of accuracy. Mm-hmm. Some, low-budget Jokers, some high-budget Jokers. But it should be noted that The Dark Knight came out in July of 2008. This episode was released in October of 2008, mm-hmm. So right on theme there. Everyone would have dressed up as a Joker in 2008, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like if this had aired in Halloween of 2016, 2 or 3 of the women might have been dressed up as Harley Quinn. because of the Suicide Squad coming out that year.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Because that's what happened in real life. Everybody was Harley Quinn that year.
Yeah.
Then we have Kelly dressed as Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City. And, you know, we had the Dorothy costume in the first Halloween episode in season 2. And Michael says, you know, that doesn't really work because you're Indian and Dorothy is clearly not Indian. And that's not the case here, but I don't think it's racist to say that this doesn't work for her. It's not a costume that's recognizable even on a white woman, because it's literally just that's all the costume is Carrie Bradshaw is
wig.
White woman. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work. And it's not because of her race. It's just strange. And she's like teetering on these really high heels.
It's like, I can't dress up as Carrie Bradshaw. I would be just dressing up in a fancy outfit like I have money. Like, that's it.
Yeah, it's strange.
Yeah.
And then Ryan is dressed as Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street, starring Michael Douglas, whose signature line in the movie is "Greed is good." So we know what sort of statement Ryan is trying to make after getting fired from the company for fraud. Is he trying to say that he didn't do anything wrong? Because if that's the case, he's sort of pulling a Michael and making the bad guy of the movie the good guy, just like Michael did with The Devil Wears Prada and Meryl Streep's character.
And Kelly, of course, confuses him with the Gecko because Gecko,
Yeah,
I guess.
Works. He looks exactly like the commercial, so I understand her confusion.
Yeah.
Back to Michael. I love how he mumbles through the chorus of "Life is a Highway." He says 4 times the charm, and then he's like, oh, no. He doesn't know any of it. It's completely wrong. But also, when they're leading up to the halfway point, he says, "I want to find a bed and breakfast halfway. Emphasis on the bed and the breakfast." And I just wrote, same. Yeah, breakfast is pretty important to me, too.
Breakfast. Beds are all the same, but breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
When Holly starts crying in the car when she realizes that this is not going to work, she just starts sobbing, like, hard. And she's clearly crying. And Michael turns to her and says, "Are you crying?" Yes. She's crying. And then he asks, "Is it allergies?" "No, if someone has watery eyes, maybe you can ask if it's allergies. This is not allergies." And then he asks, okay, so in the car, it's Daryl behind the wheel, Michael in the middle, Holly by the window. He asks if Daryl touched her.
No.
Daryl says, "What?" And Holly just looks at Michael like, "Are you an idiot? He did not touch me. No, I'm crying because we're breaking up."
Yeah, basically. Oh, did Daryl touch you? Michael.
Oh, no.
They get into an argument over how to pronounce Cornell. It's just a back and forth across the whole office. And Creed, our favorite, speaks up and says it's pronounced Colonel. It's the highest rank in the military. He's wrong on both counts, as it turns out.
On both counts.
Because in the U.S., at least, Colonel is not the highest rank. It is below Brigadier and General Officer. So there's some military knowledge for you.
We have all kinds of facts here on American Workplace. At the very end of the episode, we have a bit of a foil here, which is kind of fun. This kind of throws back to the Dwight Jim dress up, where they kind of dress up as each other. Andy dresses up as Dwight at the end of this episode, including overalls, a big straw hat, and a basket full of raw beets. He tries to take a bite out of one, but can't because they are rock solid. He says, "You're probably supposed to cook these, right?" He tosses Dwight one, and Dwight, the rural beet farmer that he is, sinks his teeth into one, no problem.
Yeah, he just scoffs and says, "Cornell." Crunch. Okay, what about deleted scenes? How about you start us off there?
One of my favorite deleted scenes from this, Daryl is getting more and more perturbed on this very long car ride with 2 very odd people. And Michael and Holly are watching a DVD in a DVD player that's sitting on the dash, and the window's open. So it's as I said, Holly is by the passenger window. That window is down, and they're laughing really obnoxiously at this DVD. Daryl can't watch the DVD because he's driving, And he makes the best out of a bad opportunity and makes a sharp turn, and the DVD goes flying out of the window. They actually mention in the commentary here that we get that that actually only happened once. And the director said, you know what, this is probably going to get cut anyway, but I really just want one good shot of this. And they got one, and it was on the first take, I think. It didn't make it into the episode, but they had to put it in the deleted scenes because it was just too perfect.
Yeah, I like the deleted scene. It makes me laugh. And there's also a couple other moments with Daryl sort of dealing with Holly and Michael, watching them play like gross lip kissing games. And then there's the whole, where is it? Talking about cow surfing. Holly and Michael are playing a game together, and Daryl says, hey, you've got to include me in some conversation so it's just not me by myself for 7 hours. So Michael says, so what kind of card games do you play in the hood? And Daryl, being a quick thinker, says cow surfing. They see a cow. The last person to say Jackson 5 has to ride the cow. So they play, and Michael automatically loses. They pull over, and Holly tells Michael it's a fake game, just as she's trying to get out. And Daryl says, yes, I made it up. I just wanted you to like me. Again, BSing it. So
Yeah.
They're funny scenes, but I'm kind of glad they were left out of the actual episode, because to me it would have lessened those final moments between Daryl and Michael where Daryl's trying to comfort him with music, because that's a really sweet moment, and he's comforting Michael when he doesn't have to after being put through all he's been put through that day, and he's sharing in some camaraderie with Michael that he knows he will appreciate. And so I'm glad that they took sort of the more antagonistic Daryl out of the episode and left it in the deleted scenes so that we could have the sweeter, more compassionate Daryl in the actual episode.
Yeah, that's a good point. But there is one more I wanted to mention. You kind of touched on it, the gross kissing games, but this one in particular, in the car, Michael and Holly are trying to see how long they can hold their breath while kissing. And Daryl says, at least it's quiet. And it reminds me of, like, if, you know, it's like the quiet game for kids, which is really, I'm sure that was just invented by parents just trying to be like, please shut up for like 5 seconds to their kids. And this is Daryl's quiet game with them. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. At the start of the episode, Holly is saying goodbye to everyone. And Oscar expresses doubt that they'll see her again anytime soon because, you know, even a flight is a big ordeal because of where they're located in relation to airports. It'd be a 2.5-hour drive to here and then an 1.5-hour flight and then another 2-hour drive. So it all really sort of equals out to the drive itself. And Holly says, I just want to say goodbye. Like, stop lingering on this. And so you're starting to see the seeds of doubt already sprouting here before she's even left Scranton. And then Kevin hugs her and apparently, like, propositions her in her ear, and she completely turns it down. She says, yeah, that won't be happening. And then Kelly says, yeah, it's smart for you to break up with Michael. And Holly says, no, we'll be going long distance, actually. And Kelly says, oh, well, that's so romantic. And she just completely flip-flops based on the scenario.
Yeah, we've seen her do that a few times. She kind of bites her tongue a few times.
There is a scene that I really wish they'd left in, and I sort of referenced this earlier because it's about the whole Dwight-Andy situation. Angela approaches Dwight in the break room and says, why are you doing this? And Dwight says, Angela, you said that Andy and me have different strengths. But Dwight knows that Andy can't do what Dwight can do in regards to survival, in regards to farming. The example he gives, like how to make food and shelter from a golden retriever. Not a skill I think Andy needs to know, but we get his point, I suppose. But he says, if I can get into Cornell, that may not make you leave Andy, but you'll lose respect for him. And she says, yeah, you're probably right. And so I think that's sort of what it all boils down to. But then it raises the question, do we actually think Dwight was going to try to get into Cornell just to prove a point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah. I mean, I could see that argument.
Mm-hmm.
So the episode, how it aired, to me, it's just getting at Andy. It's just messing with him because he has no other tactic to mess with him. Mm-hmm. If he's not going to be sleeping with Angela anymore, that's out the window. So now it's just, what can I do to mess with him? But had they left that deleted scene in, which again, do these count? I don't know. This would make a lot more sense, I think, in the context of the episode, that he is just adding to his tool belt. What can I take that Andy has? Okay, his degree. I can have that. And that'll make me, above and beyond what Andy already is. Leveling the playing field, and then what Dwight thinks of himself is just more than what Andy has, if that makes any sense at all.
It does. It would have given him a proper end goal to his irritating Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wish that they had left that in as well, if only just to give some reason behind this prank, if you will.
Right, make it appear a little bit less petty.
Yeah.
I have just one more. In the car, Michael says, this is after the bomb has been dropped. Holly thinks they're not going to make it. So Michael says, we want the same things. And Holly says, yes, we do, but from 7 hours away from each other. Michael says, that's a lucky number. There's 7 up, 7 dwarfs, 7 deadly sins. It's a sign. I don't know if you'd count 7 deadly sins as a good sign, but there was one more tidbit revealed in that same scene as well, where Holly says, we don't really know anything about each other. Did you know I'm an atheist? I don't know what your religion is. So not that it's necessarily a huge deal, but Holly is an atheist, apparently. So
learning things in the deleted scenes is cool. We don't always get character facts in deleted scenes, so that's cool.
Yeah. What about commentary?
Commentary. I didn't get a ton from this commentary, to be honest, but what I did get, they were originally supposed to wear their Halloween costumes for the whole episode, but it ended up only being in the cold open. So some Halloween episodes in The Office, we get the whole episode is about Halloween. Some we just get little bits. Here we just got the cold open.
Yeah, they said it was the hardest cold open they've done so far. I don't remember specifically why. But I mean, if they had stayed in their Halloween costumes the whole time, there would have been a Joker dressed in a Cornell costume or Cornell sweatshirt. So
yeah, like they couldn't get the stories to mash together.
Yeah, the monster mash together.
Oh, okay. I kind of walked into that
just
one.
a little bit. The Cornell mug that Dwight is showing off during one of the talking heads was asked for and made within 2 hours. It was like, hey, let's make Dwight as Cornellian as possible. Let's get him a mug. Okay. Boom, they go make it. Boom, here it is. Let's film it. So I thought really quick turnaround as far as material production goes.
The commentators note that the actors playing Jim's brother, Pete and Tom, I gotta get that in my head, gave the same look to the camera that Jim does. They both give that, like, meta glance to the camera. So they do it, and then it pans to Jim, and then he does it. So they're clearly brothers. As you said, they're a bit less eloquent. They are they're not as good at joking as Jim is.
Yeah, it's almost like Dwight. If Dwight was to try and reverse a prank on Jim, it feels like what we got from the brothers. Which, speaking of that scene, they mentioned how important it was to everyone that they got Pam to stand up for herself during that sort of interrogation, joking by the brothers. Because, I mean, again, we saw in season 3, that was her whole character arc, was gaining more personal strength and standing up for herself and speaking her mind. And then we saw her lose that a little bit when she went to college, just because she was in a new environment. And hopefully it's starting to come back a little bit more as she stands up for herself and says, listen, maybe I can't do or won't make a lot of money with an art degree, but I've got to try. And so I thought that was neat to point out that they wanted to highlight that Pam still is the Pam that she was at the end of season 3, at least in some respects.
Honestly, the last one for me is that they noted that Holly, when she's crying in the car, was able to cry every single take. And they mentioned how crazy it is. I think it was this commentary that they mentioned that you have a follow car, you have a lead car, you have, cameras in the car, maybe a camera guy in the car, depending on the situation. But it's not a super forgiving playing space. It's not like you're in a big room and you have a moment to, like, gather yourself and get your thoughts in order and then act. They have, okay, you have to start, and then you're driving, like they're on a road. And the fact that she's just able to cry every single take And then, okay, reset, I'm happy. Okay, and then cry every time is just ridiculous. It's so oppressive.
Right, not to mention that they were even getting like director notes between takes on a walkie-talkie, just because they didn't want to leave the car, have that moment, get back in the car, and do all that. It was not super conducive to like the most solid acting you could give, but she does really, really well. Just a couple of small things that we don't need to linger on. They talked about how the original location for the halfway point scene, where Michael envisions a bed and breakfast would have been, was originally somewhere else. But they learned that another production was going to be nearby on the highway, that same strip, with a live band. So they changed locations to save their sound team a little bit of extra work. And then they also mentioned that the a cappella groups that were listed by Dwight were ad-libbed by Rainn Wilson a lot of the time, so there were lots of different variations. And then the role models during the interview were ad-libbed as well. So they said one of the favorite ones that popped up during the many takes was Alan Thicke as Dwight's role model.
I think that might be it. Our discussion topic.
Yeah, I've got one serious one and one not so serious one, but to what extent do you think Tom and Pete were actually kidding with Pam? Like, this doesn't feel like kidding. What were they trying to accomplish? Were they just bad at kidding, or was there some sort of undertone to it? I don't know.
A bit of both. While that's a cheating answer, I think it is what I believe. They did come up with it pretty quickly. They mentioned something about that they used to do this with Jim's girlfriends in high school or something. But in high school, how can you really tease someone about their career path?
Right.
You can't. They're in high school. So I don't know how much truth is in that. I get that it's we're in the arts. I get that it's an easy thing to like poke fun at. It's like, oh, you must not make any money. It's like, yeah, I don't. But like, it's a little aggressive, and I think even Jim takes more offense to it than Pam does. She starts to feel really hurt, I think. I don't know.
It's hard because, I mean, we see how good a guy Jim is, and we want to think that his family is sort of on the same page. I almost want to say there were sort of undertones of maybe warning Jim just a little bit, just looking out for him. Like, this is who you're marrying. Consider what she's pursuing and think about your future together. Is this going to work if she's not making enough money? So, yes, they were joking, but they were also giving Jim and Pam something to think about. Is this really the best use of your time and money right now if it's not going to return your investment in the long run? But again, they were trying to hide it under the guise of actually joking, and it just doesn't come across that way, unfortunately. So,
and I don't even know if they were doing it to like, hey, maybe you don't want to marry her, because if they know the brother at all, they know that he wants to marry her. But it's just like by the way, you'll be making more money than she will if she pursues art. And even if that was true, like, we all know that Jim's okay with that. He'd be fine if she didn't want to work. He'd be fine, whatever. You know, he would want to make her happy. So
yeah, he's not Roy.
Right, exactly. So I guess it's just like a poke at him to say, like, you'll be making more money. I don't know. Very ineffective.
And it is worth pointing out that at the end of it all, Jim and Pam are walking together, and he gets a text from them and says that reads, "Pam, cool, welcome to the family." So they work it out. Maybe they appreciate the fact that she sort of stands up for herself, and that Jim is so adamant. I can never remember how to pronounce that. In his support for her, so it works itself out in the end. But anyways, I just thought that was a good discussion point. My less serious discussion topic is, what is your go-to driving song? We hear "Life is a Highway" 4.5 times in this song, or in this episode. What would your driving song be?
See, I don't drive anymore, which is unfortunate because I always liked driving and blasting music, which I don't really get to do anymore. But when I last had a car, I was listening to a lot of Fun, because pardon the pun, I think they're a lot of fun to listen to while driving. Queen, is always good. Like, if I do a road trip, Queen plays for sure. Like, constantly. So I'm going to say anything by Queen.
Okay, cool.
You?
Yeah, I've got a few answers. Billy Joel is my favorite. Obviously, I've already made allusions to that many times. Hamilton is great driving stuff, especially Act 1 before it gets super depressing.
Soundtracks, Broadway soundtracks. If I have a car, that's what I miss, is being able to sing along. And on the subway, they look at you funny. So it's not
just
fun.
make it Les Mis and turn it into like a production. Get some money out. Like
put a hat down.
Yeah. And then just a couple more like recent things. Feel It Still by Portugal the Man. I'm still on that song. Still.
We have many a tweet back and forth about this song because we both love the song and it gets in our heads.
If there was a band that formed their entire style and sound around that song, I would listen to nothing but that band. It is so good.
It would be so good. That is the end of our official 41st episode of An American Workplace. Contact us at facebook.com/workplacepod or at workplacepod on Twitter. If you care to rate, review, and subscribe, you can do so on iTunes, and you can email feedback and ideas to workplacepod@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at KTLady623 or at facebook.com/katie.white.
The best place to find me is still on Twitter at Chadadada, that is CHADADADA. Also facebook.com/chad.hopkins, and then my other podcast, Cinescope, where we talk about the movies we love and why we love them. You can find that where podcasts can be found, and also thecinescopepodcast.com. And all show notes and contact information for this show can be found at workplacepodcast.com.
Another shout out to Shirley Lim for being our latest Patreon subscriber. Thank you to all of our subscribers. We always appreciate the support, and we hope you appreciate the bonus material. If you want to shout out and more on An American Workplace each week, including access to our discussion, outline notes, a logo sticker, bonus episodes, live streams, etc., check out our Patreon page and pick the support level that you think it is most worth at patreon.com/workplacepod. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us to watch one of our favorite shows, The Office, here on episode 41 of An American Workplace. Make sure to join us at episode 42 for our discussion on the next 2 episodes of season 5, Customer Service and Business Trip. Bye.
Bye. Oh no, we lost Katie again.
There you are.
Oh, okay, good. I'll send that text anyways, because that's what I did out loud anyways.
Good Lord.
Okay.
Okay. Quick, finish the episode.
Okay.